I put it to you, Madam Foreperson of the jury, why do men take the involuntary, normal noises of their mind to be of some greater significance than those of, say, their stomach? Then I put it to you, Master Monk of the monastery, why do some men sit and ponder their navels and others their thoughts? No, wait. Then I put it to you one and all. What unfulfilled potential is it within man's consciousness that makes him want to entertain such questions and pursue such activities? And a perceptive lion, hearing and considering this, to himself thought, this matter again causes me to feel both relieved yet somehow saddened to be only the beautiful creature that I am and not man. How things go in a good old closed system. Everything is broke and everything is working. Everything is fake and everything authentic. Everything is true and everything misleading. Everything's real medicine and pill with nothing in it. No. Oh, you can't get away. No, you can't get away. Oh, you can't get away for the simple fact that you simply cannot get away, darling. Now there. Defined, the mystical warrior, knight, and adventurer. He who undertakes a great quest when in fact there is nowhere to go. Well, hardly anywhere. Further limbed, the mystical patient. He who undertakes to get well when in fact he was never sick. A man asked, as regards the matter of breaking away from collective thought and being individually creative, just how can you think in ways original that are useful and informative and not simply foolish and irrelevant? And the answer is, to be able to do it, you must be able to do it. And now, how you can tell, part 217. Those who don't really know anything will resort to facts. Man's never satisfied. Man's never satisfied. At simple levels with behavior, especially that of others. At higher levels, hell, there still ain't one similar. There still is none similar extant in the general population. That's why mystics have to take up all the slack. Life told a bunch of anxious-looking sycophants hanging out on the corner, hey, if I need you, I'll call you. And some of them whine, but we thought that you did. And getting so suddenly caught in such an unseemly and embarrassing situation, life replied, you're right, I did. And I do appreciate all of you showing up. Whew, another close one. The equitable mathematics of it all. It is always the insignificant who feel the most important. Part of 1, question and answer game. Is it possible to be more conscious and be popular? No. Well, is it possible to be more conscious and not be unpopular? Yes. Well, does that mean that I'm getting a better handle on what being popular actually means? No. Since I have already given the answers yes and no, my reply repertoire is depleted. Thank you, game players, and there will be parting gifts for each of you, caskets. Dr. Zork's prescription for the day. People shouldn't talk to themselves unless they know what they're doing. And if they do, well, it's too late to worry about it anyway. Now some news from the playground nurse. It is possible for the more alert children to play around the maypole if they grease it good and wait till June to do so. The sequence and history of what an awakened man knows runs both forward and backward, and sideways, up and down, off at oblique angles, and like that, bitty bat. Or bitty bop. One man wrote the longest book in the world and published it in his neural juices. Unless someone's holding a gun on you right this instant, only the past and future can pass for serious. The actual here and now is at worst dangerously indifferent. If morality was of a physical, objective nature, which it is, then only the immoral would have to be instructed therein. To help streamline his thinking, one man began to mentally condense all the words he used. But as opposed to how it's ordinarily done, he took out all the consonants and left in the vowels. After all, added he, what is a challenge if it's not spelled A-E-E? Trying to enlighten and wake up another person is like trying to push a freight train up a mountain when it doesn't want to move. And it's off the tracks. And believes the terrain is level anyway. And for all your effort, complains about you even offering to help. Hey, is it any wonder mystics have ulcers? No, hey, real mystics don't even have stomachs. Hey, no, hey. 50% of the time, that is, when they're referring to others, ordinary men will say that charity begins at home. But thank God, the more alert have no permanent address and are thus spared specious assistance. Trying to reach another condition of consciousness is not a charitable effort undertaken by do-gooders. It's not even religious, as perceived of by ordinary minds, which is why they believe that it either is or isn't. Knowing what's going on is the only thing a man can know that he can't talk about. In a world where nothing works, everything works. And in a world where everything works, nothing does. Hey, are we digging the world of man's mind or what, dudes? If you look real good, just at daybreak, you can see the crusades and holy wars as man's mythification of his need to criticize. Another operational description of those who play like they want to awaken via some dialogue. Which is the most important, a good typewriter or good typing paper? Well, I say, where does that leave the content of what's written? Where does that come into play? Hey, you're the same guy who wanted to know who put the wheat germ in his vodka. Get out of here. To allow oneself to stay any longer in his own private monastery, one man required that he either give up reading or drinking. Mental man exists inside a punching bag. Mystics won't out. Everyone else is satisfied to go another couple of rounds. Man's heroes remain generally of the physical variety, since intellectual feats are still of little interest to most. Protocol, y'all. For the awakened to speak of the non is to join them. Okay, simple man's version. To pee in a stream is to pollute your own waters. Daddy, is that why in mystic forest there are no babbling brooks? What is man's routine, less than excellent state of consciousness other than mentally residing in a closed system with no knowledge of the ramifications thereof? And of course, further, what is the condition of enlightenment but the freedom therefrom? The fairgrounds of the mind. Human thought, at best a carousel. Impressive sounding human thought. At best, fancy horses their own. Actually, knowing what's going on. Explosives on the midway. Query. Why are there no suicide prevention lines for the enlightened? Answer. Because they know to keep their mouths shut. Quick tip on how to awaken consciousness. Turn your mind inside out to the point that's the size of the universe. I might add, without getting a run in it. Like, I felt it my duty for the sake of public safety. Apparently pressed by necessity, a mystic finally responded and said, I am part of no sequence, school, or tradition, and carry no credentials. And some were then sure he was no mystic at all, while others were more certain than ever that he was. The less you know, the more you say you know. A vocational update. Anyone who believes outsiders would be interested in the backstage workings of his particular profession sure as hell ain't in the mystical business. Ruminated one man. The trouble with humor, as it's played around here, is that it's not funny. Side note for the side road traveler. Critique is permissible of a place you don't live in. They closed down one mystical school when almost as many people began to get it as didn't get it. Or maybe it was the other way around. And Zolius, his wife, said, I told you we should have moved. Speaking on behalf of science, all right, ordinary people. Surely ranking right there with one of the great discoveries, one of the great laws of physics, has to do with the state of constant energy, amounts of energy. To wit, as they said in high school, that energy cannot be, or matter and energy cannot either be produced or destroyed. Now, that has got to be ranked right up there with some of the great ones. And yet you realize that not the greatest thinker in the world, not Brother Newton himself, not Einstein, no one has yet, or man collectively, to any large segment, to apply that to himself mentally. And do you also realize by now that until you understand, until you see for yourself, there's just, it's beyond any debate, there's no question, there's not even a place for a speck of doubt to hide. Until you understand that man mentally lives in a closed system, you can't understand anything. Of course, that's one way to put it. The other way to put it is you're ordinary and you think you understand everything. Except just don't push me. Just don't push me. We'll discuss it, but don't push me. Yeah. Nothing is comprehensible, even at the ordinary level, which is not the point of, or is not really the ultimate interest of those who undertake the great secret mystical quest. But even ordinary affairs, the whole thing about life at best being human, at ordinary thought at best being like a carousel, which I've, for those of you keeping score, some I have to bring up to date, getting close to the 1,000th time probably I've used that. There's nothing like a little hyperbole ordinary life makes no sense. It is not supposed to ordinary minds. But that is why debate is the franca lingua of ordinary minds, from science to philosophy. It is why the fuel that runs civilization is the lack of consensus, the lack of conclusions. It's all as it should be, that the mind cannot, under ordinary conditions, come to any final conclusion. And if you're following what I'm saying, I could, if I presented some sort of very passing and unimportant matter, I could get ordinary intelligent people to see that momentarily. They'd have to turn away from it, but I could almost get ordinary minds if I point out, you know why we can't come, or why men cannot come to any great conclusion as to what is objective truth, reality, morality, decency, that men cannot really, since the day of space exploration, you can't even actually determine up from down. Do you realize that taken at a greater level, it has to do with the nature of man's mind, that they never will? And I could get some ordinary people to go, and kind of get a little shiver, like it was maybe a little cocktail party game. Then they'd have to look off. They're not supposed to see what's involved, but what I'm pointing out at a fairly uninteresting level, well, it's interesting for a few minutes after you see it. It's just that all the questions, as they put it, that plague mankind are answerable within a few minutes. Personally, that is, if you've seen that intellectually, mentally, man lives within a closed system. Once you see that, then all of the ordinary questions are they're gone. Well, to be truthful to the law of conservation of energy, they're not gone, but you realize they ain't going to be gone anyway, and so then you realize with a question, it's man, if you look at all the ordinary questions that trouble men's minds, it is as though they have shot an arrow out and they keep waiting, debating, discussing, when will the son of a bitch ever hit target? Never. Or probably some of the earlier speculations, or some of the speculations having to do with a limited universe at one time in the world of physics, the idea that if indeed you could shoot, for instance, a beam of light out, and you should live so long, and you had the power for it to keep going, and you stood here and you shut it out, pow, and you could stand there long enough, it'd finally come back and shine on the back of your head. That would be the kind of picture that they had at one time of a closed, kind of curved within itself, a closed universe, but without edges and all the things that they played around with 30 or 40, 50 years ago, and then sort of got headaches and got dizzy and thought, well, this is no proper sport for a physicist. The first thing we know, we'll have philosophers and weirdos and theologists and Zen monks and all kinds of people hanging around. And sure enough, they finally did, but the physicists gave it up quickly enough. But there is a validity to it that I could get people, as I said, to see that the ordinary questions cannot be answered because they assume they can be answered, which is one of the reasons they keep asking, and they will settle for the fact that nobody ever answers them, that there is no cure for anything. There is no cure for poverty. There is no cure for ignorance. There is no cure for uncivil behavior. There is no cure, what's that other one? For death! Oh. Well, remember, but now I think that, thanks to your good urging, that we should have that down to one inseparable term. You're dumb as shit and you're going to die. I mean, I feel like that's not just all one news item. That's just one single objective truth by which all decent people should live. Well, once your ankle heals, and you can get back around. If you see that the arrow can never hit, it can never stop, the answers will never be forthcoming to the questions men have. All that happens is the questions in particular forms ebb and wane, flow and come in, they go out, they disappear, but they cannot be answered. But it has to do with the fact, and they just can't see it. They discover it, I'll give them credit, because you heard it in high school before you heard it from me, so hell, I'll give them credit, I don't care anyway. Copyrights run out, I couldn't collect anything. I give them credit, ordinary men, that they discovered that energy/matter cannot be either created nor destroyed. That it's just here and it was always here. And they were just delighted. That was sort of, at the time, trust me, I was kind of hanging. They were delighted. And I don't blame them. That was the kind of thing that was fun to think of. The first few people who heard it. They enjoyed thinking of it. Wow. And that was the end of it. Intellectually, mentally, once you see that man lives in a closed system at the ordinary level, then all questions of every form, all the ordinary ones, that's the end of it. You understand why. You understand why no one's come up with a question. You understand why men debate. You understand why men apparently fight and draw blood over matters mental. You understand why people say that they're driving themselves crazy trying to come up with a question. You understand? You just simply understand that once you recognize that man mentally lives in a closed system, the everyday world is answered. That's it. Then you're faced with even more fun. Because then the whole idea, once you see that, and I'm getting, I guess, oblique on top of vague, at least intellectually, in case any civilians are watching or listening. Since that answers, or that ends all ordinary questions. The other one is, that is vague, but I'll go ahead and do it. In specific, as it should be. That what is a higher state of consciousness? What is the whole point then? If ordinary life, if all the questions of ordinary life can just be, just the air is let out and it's like Macy's parade en masse, marched on your balloon. And there it is, the balloon of all questions. And it's flat. You could roll it up and put it in your pocket, take it home, maybe smoke it. But that's the end of it. Then the idea of something beyond that, something transcendental, you could ask, if you're following this, you could ask, well, what could be after that? If you've answered it all, that's when the fun really starts, though. Because then the fun is, you can get out of the closed system. I am not going to attempt to prove that. I am not going to give myself a severe headache again. I tried it the last time, I won't tell you when, a long time ago. And I don't mean your lifetime, but it will give you a severe headache. Well, it first gave the people a headache. I wasn't trying to create sympathy for myself. Because first off, they got a severe headache. After I tried to describe it for a long period of time, suddenly I was going to tell you it was a whole country, but I'll admit it was a small country. They all got a headache. And then it was just a short time after that I got just a blistering headache. So since then, I haven't really tried it to explain it. But now let's go back. That is a literal fact what I've been talking about thus far. Other than that and the headache and the other thing. But the scientific part about the inability of matter / energy to be created or destroyed. In other words, a closed system physically. That science accepts that. Ordinary minds who've had any passing exposure to it now accept it. It has the ring of the truth to it. Yeah. It is also true mentally. And if it be true mentally, then you're left with the question I was presenting, that if we go now from that being an absolute physical, scientific fact, including mind, that is, that man mentally lives there, which if you told that to an Einstein, how's he going to get out of it? Or a Planck or somebody, if you dug them up and say, well, look, how come you never thought about this mentally? Now, they could deny it, because then you're back to the mind protecting itself and saying, well, I can imagine anything. My mind is free. And you can say, wait a minute. Your mind's in your body, right? It's in your head. You can say that you can imagine something else. And even Einstein and those cats, don't let them, if you dig them up, don't let them start this crap like, wait a minute, my brain is not actually my mind. Don't let them pull that crap on you. That's the easy way out. Ask them this. So leave your brain here. Leave your brain here. Take it out. You start that and they'll leave. Well, they'll pretend that they're getting really spooked. But the thing is, they know that you're about to corner them again. At any rate, you could say, well, how come you cannot apply that to man's mind? And besides the fact of the mind trying to always defend itself, and normally successfully so with the simple-minded, by saying, wait a minute, my mind is not so limited because I can imagine anything. I can imagine you're wrong. I can imagine you're right, which proves I can imagine anything, so my mind is not captive. Those people will let go, because I'm telling you, it is really somewhat embarrassing to see a grown mystic trying to argue with children. So save yourself the humiliation. Plus it eats up on lunchtime. But if you ask them, if you gone past that, and you say, well, how come you never thought about the mind also is limited, that man's mental life lives within the same kind of closed system? And they'll go, no, not the same. Then you say, all right, it's in your head, right? It's in your body. You're stuck, yeah. And whereas your body's in this closed system, you're in the universe, yeah. Well, how in the world, where do you get this idea? How can a man of your reasonable, logical, sequential kind of thinking, how can you abide the idea that the mind is not the same limited as a piece of wood, as a planet, as your body, as the smallest molecule you can imagine? Why can you not see that you are residing, trapped in, without any exception, the same kind of closed system? And they just go, no. So if you take it physically, literally, as I was presenting it originally, which is true, and now if you take it a bit past that into the area of metaphor, which is serious scientific stuff, if you take it that point, and I say, then what is the state, so-called state of some greater degree of consciousness? What is that other than some escape from, some freedom from a closed system? Then, if you was even following it metaphorically, you would be well within your less to say, well, wait a minute. No matter how great you are, no matter, you can call it a mystic or the enlightened or anything you want to, but if we've already established that mentally you're living in a closed system, in toto, we're in a closed system, then how are you going to say that any form of consciousness, anything can escape from that? And then you could say, well, I got you there. And I'll have to admit, you're right. That's humiliating. I heard this joke about the Lakers. Well, it has to do with the Lakers and the threatened hockey strike. Well, does anybody know anything at all about Canadian football? You know. How easy it is to distract even a philosophical convention such as yourself. Don't lose your place. Even though you may approve of, God knows why, Canadian football. Along with the fact that the arrow can never hit the target, along with the fact that none of the ordinary questions can be answered, comes the fact, since nothing can be completed mentally, that man is always criticizing, that everyone is finding fault with everyone else, as they should. And we're not talking, we're trying to take it, I am taking it to some degree above the kind of biosurvival conflicts. We're not talking about people actually fighting over food or fighting over land and water rights. We're talking about now civilized men in conflict over ideas, which they've always been, but now it's of more and more importance. It is taking the forefront. It is taking the forefront with some. Let's be honest, folks. Most people are simply cavemen dressed up in suits. I mean, might as well face the facts. Orangutans with degrees. Warthogs with doctorates. Pigs with a seat on the Chicago board. Within a closed system, it goes hand in hand. It is why I keep trying to turn your attention on the idea of criticism and fault finding. And it's been lingering throughout all religions, senses of morality, but especially religions about don't judge your fellow man, leave it to God. Don't worry about the Cadillac. Don't worry about the Hyundai in your brother's eye until you fish out the Lincoln Town Car in your own. Well, you know I'm not an Old Testament scholar. However it goes. Or don't pick on an Indian until you've eaten his moccasins for a mile. Whatever the hell. Well, you know what I'm talking about. It is not just in religion that goes through all of the, on this planet, the kind of a continuing intellectual genetic strain in religion and everyday wisdom, folk wisdom, colloquial sayings, an idea that there is something, at least under some conditions, questionable if not useless, and if not even dangerous, in criticizing other people within certain limits, which are always left again with a closed system, as such as a Muslim can come up and ask a Christian, well, wait a minute, you say that you shouldn't judge other people, then how come you're shooting at us? How come you raise hell and think all the mosques could be burned down or closed up? And the Christians, or whoever it is, has to do something very intelligent like, hey, screw you, get out of here. In other words, there is no answer. Unless the Muslims just won't go, ha ha, I brought the Captain Irony out of them again. I made them get sarcastic. The whole idea of criticism, in another sense, is a continuing manifestation of the mind's inability to come to a conclusion, except in the case where someone is criticizing, they're even so dumb that they don't even have a whiff of this, which is the only reason you criticize anyone. It's not that it's something immoral, not from a more conscious view. I tried to slip that one in on you tonight. The whole idea of morality, if there is some objective, real sense of morality, parenthetically I put there is, it's only the immoral who must receive instructions therein. That is, if a man understood what morality was, and those who are natural-born mystics do understand it, then you understand it. You can't be taught. Plus you understand it's got nothing to do with behavior. It's got nothing to do with sex. It's got nothing to do with honesty, except in a allegorical sense. That is, honesty being the ability to look reality point blank and not blink, not even care, have no particular opinion about it. That is morality. But anyway, the whole idea that's everywhere, that there is something very questionable about judging your fellow man. Now, you have remnants of that, of men saying that, revered thinkers, or else their words would not be remembered for several thousand years in the West. And yet it still goes on. And no one can explain why. Until now. The whole thing about criticism is the same thing. It's just a parallel road to the fact that men cannot come to conclusions mentally in a closed system. Never. Never, ever. Therefore, there is no end to criticism. There is no way. I'll just say this very quickly. This is not the point, but surely by now you see it. There is no way. Let's assume that you are one of the most intelligent, bright, insightful, charitable, decent, humane people on this planet. And being such, you have a small list, at least, of well-founded criticisms of, in general, and maybe in a few cases in particular, of the untoward, otherwise behavior, uncivil behavior of other people. If you were suddenly given the power to rectify what you consider to be these ills, if you had the power to do so, dig this, you still couldn't do it. That's what you get for thinking you can finish the sentences nowadays. It cannot be done. Now consider the Crusades and Holy Wars, which are everywhere, not just between Christians and Muslims and Christians and Jews. The whole idea, you're either well-read enough or you just take my word for it, because the whole idea of holy wars, the Crusades are well known here in the West, but the whole idea of holy wars, and that's everywhere on this planet, that is the good guys against the bad guys, whether it's Christianity, Shinto-based beliefs, just tree frog God followers against the non-tree frog God followers. Everywhere on this planet is the notion of holy wars. The news item I presented to you tonight, hot off the wire, was that the Crusades, all holy wars, can be seen as man's mystification of the need to criticize. Because the whole idea of a holy war, the whole idea that there is something objective, there is some objective basis upon which to wage this war, whether you're waging the war literally or just intellectually, that there is some objective basis for it. Well, the obvious, the crude way is to say, well, God's on our side. I'm going to kill you because Allah sent me to straighten you out. Now that's pretty simple. It's still going on. But there is another degree to it that is more subtle, simply the intellectual degree, that there are holy wars going on. And if a scientifically turned mind was here, such as I had made up earlier tonight, I could get them to see. I could say, all right, there are holy wars going on in your level, in your area of the world. That is, there is a continuing war having to be waged against, or by your kind of people, by right-thinking, empirically driven seekers of the truth, against ignorance, folly, short-sightedness, superstition. And he'll go, yeah, that's true. That's always been the position and the so-called, or the problem of science. And I can say, but it is also a kind of holy war. And he can say, no, I'm an atheist, or I'm an agnostic. And I can say, yeah, but wait. Let's take holy war in quotation marks. That is, you're not just out on your own. You're not just, let's say his name's Professor Smith, Dr. Smith. Now I say, you're not just out on some kind of crackpot Dr. Smith based one-man crusade against the world. He will go, certainly not. You know my credentials. You know who I am. I'm not just out there playing Cassandra. I'm not just one. I don't feel like I'm some lonely voice in the wilderness. And I can say, no, you feel like that, and rightfully so, that you're sort of a, again, in quotation marks, sort of a soldier for the scientific army, for the progress of science, for the progress of objective exploration of the frontiers of human knowledge. They go, well, yeah. And I say, well, that's all I mean when I say a holy war, that there's something behind you, that you're standing on, that you represent something. You're one part of the human parade. You're one part of the human experience, but you're not, for instance, you do not represent some religion. He'd say, well, certainly not. You're not just part of some crazy faction that some pseudo-scientific faction that says that the universe is made up mostly of ice or whatever. And he go, no, not pseudoscience. So I said, well, so in a sense, you are a warrior in a holy war. And he would go, yeah. The point being is that everyone, including so-called scientists, have got to fall back on the damn herd. That is all ordinary thought amounts to. From ordinary views, it is oft-time given distinction. That is, that the belief in quantum physics is quite superior, not even the same class, as that kind of nutty thing of believing that the whole world is made up of ice and smoke, and just certain combinations thereof, and it's an illusion being foisted upon man by some other alien race that keeps us from seeing it. And you say, well, no, that's silly. The former represents reality, and the latter is just ignorance, just foolishness. It is all, I submit to you, it is all a reflection of man's mythification of the need, and I was being understated to say the need, to criticize. Because the more, from an ordinary view, that the more that you apparently represent some large faction, seekers of the truth, the scientific community, and I could be doing this religiously on the basis of, well, major religions against factions, sects, but it is always what appears to be the heart of middle-class reality, insanity, is always a kind of collective assumption of what the truth is, or a collective tacit agreement, at least tacit agreement of what reality is. And therefore a scientist, at the ordinary level, a real thinker, an intellectual, is never a one-man show. And he will not tolerate being labeled as such. He would take it as an accusation. He would take it at least as an inference that he was less than his credentials and his presentation deserve. If he said, well, here's my I have a new theory. A theory now. This is something I'm working on. But I have a new theory regarding some additions to the family of quarks. I have a new addition to the general theory of quantum mechanics. Now, it's new, but this is my theory. And if he presented it, and I won't try to make up some, but he presented it, and you could follow it a little bit, and somebody stood up and said, I've heard people on the street corners, Dr. So-and-so, forgive me for saying this, but I've heard people on the street corner saying that they represented some invisible race that lives under the surface of Mars, or that talk to God. I've heard them come up with ideas not that dissimilar from what you just said. They just use certain different terminology. You know, a one-man guy, anybody can stand up and come up with some kind of weird idea. I can't believe that you did it here at this conference. You do understand, I hope, what I'm trying to point out to. He would go, no, wait. Now, I said it was a theory, and he'd do all that. But also, whether he got around to being able to respond this specifically or not, his whole feel is that he is not staying out there naked, stripped alone, saying, here's my idea. Because if it would range somewhere from somebody in the audience doing what I did, if I confused it more, either that or even an attack from some collective quarter, that some magazine, some periodic in the scientific community attacked his idea later. Now, future issue, his feeling still is that he is not staying there and has made some sort of ass out of himself. He may take great umbrage and exception to the critique of his theory, but he does not feel as though that he is having to take these blows and this criticism as one individual, because he was never one individual. And if it gets to it, whether you're following this or not, I'm going to have to move on. He knows if he had to, he would say, wait a minute. Now, I said it was a theory. And I still have great faith in it. But, you know, these cheap attacks you're giving, do you know who I am? Maybe you don't know who I am. And he will start, not just in the sake of being vainglorious, but he'll start saying, wait a minute. Now, I know the theory it is quite a step sideways from some of what is current accepted belief. But do you understand, and at least some way he'd bring it out, that I have such and such degrees, I've been such and such, I have worked with Dr. So-and-so, I was in such and such lab, which may, at first you may think their ideas are in direct conflict with what I'm doing, but I want you to know I worked with Dr. So-and-so. A few people forget, I worked with him for 20 years. The whole point is he is not staying there naked alone. Which, if any of you would like another little hint, that's why I keep bringing up the idea of originality, individuality, and the herd and the collective. It is not to pick on people, but it's to see that if you're ever going to understand anything, there is no herd behind you. There is no collective thought. There are no credentials. And it's not simply a matter of somebody going, hey, I like that idea. By God, I'll be a rebel. We've already been through that. If that's all you want to do, whatever the fashion is now, if it's purple hair, go dye yours green. Put on your clothes backwards. No, that's right. That was popular for a while. Wear them, put them on upside down, and go out and stick your tongue out at the first priest or rabbi or undersecretary of state that you see, and go home and be happy. Being individual is almost impossible. Well, it's about as possible as being able to escape mentally a closed system wherein we have already firmly established in the short time of 45 minutes here that it's impossible. If you live in a closed system, how are you going to get out? The whole idea of crusades and holy wars, all religion, all science, we'll push it on quickly, at least you want to stand around and think about that, are all mystifications of man's need to criticize, which is another way of saying they're all mystifications of man's inability to come to a conclusion. And if the mind cannot come to a conclusion, this is not the reason why, but I can put it to you another way. Why else? What better reason for men to be sort of irritated and aggressive? Again, we're talking mentally now. What better reason for men to sort of have the intellectual red ass, rather than the fact that they can't ever come to a conclusion that's satisfying? That alone, if we were psychologists, forgive me, if we were psychologists and psychiatrists and that kind of people, I could say, well, what better reason for people to kind of be irritated, kind of be edgy in life, and kind of be touchy and always criticizing each other, and like, you believe in what, or you're what kind of political, you're what? And always that kind of little sneer and that criticism. What better reason for men to be like that than the fact that they cannot come to any conclusion? And therefore, as all good psychologists know, you personally get the red ass about yourself, and you can't stand that. You can't go around like that. First thing you know, you'll have an upset stomach, headaches, tightness of the breath, I mean, it can make you mentally ill. So what do? What do they call it? You transfer it out there. Which, you notice I didn't have the heart. I had the decency not to drag in psychologists with the physicists and talk about the whole psychologist that people want to transfer their aggression, or people internalize somebody else's aggression. All of this within the great Newtonian, the mechanical, the quark, the quantum world of known physics that is closed. No, but wait. I am simply internalizing the kind of fear and trauma and aggression from my father. And you're a high school graduate. Oh, I'm not, perhaps you don't know who I am. I didn't know, just Dr. So-and-so. I am a psychiatrist. Graduate, blah, 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 blah. And you don't remember high school physics about energy and, oh yeah, I know. Consider how, in all senses, how well-founded, taking it out of the religious straitjacket, but the idea of crusades, of returning some great, take it all now allegorical, of retrieving some homeland from the hands of the Philistines and the barbarians to go off on a holy crusade. A holy crusade. And it can be without benefit of deity, that is, we're out crusading for the truth. That is good for everybody. Be good for Christians, Jews, Muslims, and moose and elk. Yeah. Members of the American Legion? Questionable. But this will be good almost across the board for everyone. If truth triumphs over ignorance. Holy wars don't come any holier than that. I mean, nowadays, the more civilized, the more educated and sophisticated you are, that kind of, the feeling of having that kind of backup, that kind of motivation in your efforts would make the most pious of Catholics or Jews, it'd make them go, boy, I missed the boat. Or as they say in southern religious circles, it would make the most pious of religious feel as though they are slow walking. No. Because what better way? What better foundation upon which a man mentally could stand than say, I am not here representing, I am not out on a quest for truth. They'd probably throw in justice and charity and all that other stuff, which is another matter. If you'd like to figure how you can be charitable within a closed system. But the feeling that I am standing on a foundation that is far, far greater than one person. Poor old me, Dr. Johnson. Just poor old me. I am backed, and I am not representative of some sect. I am not simply here to push one opinionated opinion. Opinionated view. I am here representing, my efforts are like the holiest of holy wars. I simply want the truth, which will benefit us all. And, of course, I'll go ahead and throw in again. And being the fact that they will never discover it, they tend to, shall we put it, be critical of their fellow man. Not that it's not well deserved, but critical. Consider the folly, the absolute ultimate, brand new example of folly of having any faith, any belief in any conspiratorial theory idea within a closed system. Yeah. And by conspiratorial theory, I add again the idea of God, that is, a force outside reality, outside the universe, an extra systemic force, God, and that ever popular subconscious mind. I always use just those two, if you notice, to cover everything, but we could to actually cover all possible bases to point out the conspiratorial theories represented, the full spectrum, by God, the subconscious mind, and stupidity. See, now we have the full triune has now been covered. In a manner, I might say, it is execrable. Consider any idea that there are forces going on that are being hidden from man purposefully. In the case of God, the religious believe all sorts of things, but that God is either, he hides himself because of original sin, or he hides himself because just man doesn't deserve to see him, or he hides himself because whatever else they say. And then the subconscious mind, that whole idea of subconscious forces, is that they're not actually hiding. It's because we're talking about just energy. We're not talking about something real. It's just things that happen. But it's not something you can bring out and see. And of course, stupidity, nobody. Maybe I should drop that third one. No. I'll leave it if you can handle it. If not, consider it dropped. But anyone who does not understand that man lives mentally in a closed system, which that includes everyone except, I can count the number of people who are excluded from that in the hand I have in my pocket. Well, all right, both hands. To make you feel better. I can count the people on the planet. If you don't know that is, if you do not fully yourself, you just simply do not recognize on a continuing, once and for all basis that man mentally lives in a closed system, period. If you don't understand that, then you believe in conspiracy theories. And it doesn't matter whether that term has ever crossed your lips. It doesn't matter if you say, oh, no. Now, I know what those conspiracists, every one of them some kind of right-wing crackpot, or they could be a left-wing crackpot. But it has nothing to do with me. It has everything in the world to do with you. Because you believe. Understand this. If you do not realize that the man's mental world is a closed system, then you believe that questions can be answered. And if you believe that, then you believe that there's some reason they're not being. That is, you believe that there's something going on outside what's right in here. Now, an ordinary mind will try to weasel out of that, but there is no weaseling. A little minking, but no weaseling. According to, I was going to say a little ferreting, but there's no need to run this in the ground. Next thing you know, I'd have to send somebody to go for that book and bring it. No. If you do not understand that mentally man lives in a closed system, and thus understand, that is, it has leveled out all the questions that plague ordinary man. All the ordinary questions of every stripe are just then gone. There's no more questions, it's just period. I'm just being as mystically unmystical, or vice versa, as I can. What ordinary minds consider questions, I don't care what, these serious, deep philosophical questions and the scientific ones. I just don't lay on that because they're of very little interest to most would-be mystics. But every great question, like, is there some general theory to explain reality? Well, hell yeah. And that's easy for me to stand here and say without a suit and tie, no credentials. And then go, wait a minute, the best minds in science are working on that now. And you're going to say that there is. Yeah. Well, I guess you're insinuating that you know what it is. No, I wouldn't say that. Now, answer the first question. What is this, a damn contest? If so, what's the prize? I answered one. I don't normally entertain questions. Wait a minute. But you're saying that there is such a theory. Yeah. I'll look you dead now. Yeah, there's one. Well, it's what they call a theory. That's what I would have called it. But there is one thing that explains everything. Yes. Well, hell yeah. But you'll never find it until you understand there's a closed system in which you're asking the question. And if you don't understand that, you believe in conspiracies. I was going to get into the real height, the extreme, the stunning, if I may say so, example at a new level of conspiratorial ideas. And that is, it doesn't matter whether they're true or not. And I was going to give you one example and then give you like 7 or 8 different views that people never consider, that somebody said, well, here's obviously a conspiracy. And I could name you off, I didn't count them, 7, 8, so I got tired of talking or you lost your place. All right, 3 or 4 or 5 real good immediate views that no one ever takes. And they all come to the same thing, though, that it doesn't matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is that they do not understand it's a closed system. And if you do not understand that man lives in a mentally closed system, you'll believe anything. Or conversely, you'll believe nothing. Or, if I may go back and quote myself, in a world where nothing works, everything works. And in a world where everything works, nothing does. That's what a closed system. Make it sound nice and literary here at the end. I'll reread. Well, I just did one. In a world where, well, let me read this one. This was the sequence they were in. How things go in a good old closed system. Everything is broke and everything is working. Everything is fake and everything authentic. Everything is true and everything misleading. Everything's real medicine and pill with nothing in it. Does that cover it? That is what life is mentally. This is no moral judgment. This is not saying, well, fake. You know, everything's broke, everything's fake. Ordinary people, if they were to try to take this and use it in some way, they go, what you mean is you're saying like fake religions, or you're talking about fake science, or you're talking about some people's idea of morality is simply broken. And they go into all sorts of ideas of values. And this is everything in the system. How it is in a closed system, but men can't see it. That in it, everything's broke and everything's working. That is both an objective statement and the all-inclusive subjective statement, which comes to be the same thing. That is, you can say, wait a minute, such and such is broke. How true? And somebody on the other side of the room, somewhere in this universe, will go, look at that same thing, whether they heard this or not, and go, well, what a neat, look how neat that works. Everything is broke and everything's working. Everything is real, everything is fake, and everything's authentic. And it gets down to the last one, which I slipped in last time. It didn't seem to work, so we pressed on. Everything's real medicine and a pill with nothing in it. That everything is real medicine on this planet. Everything is real drugs and everything's placebos. Which I could use an example as, again, of the great conspiracy. Is them wrestling over the fact and what to interpret, what to make the statistics that medicine, science keeps giving out, doing these kind of blind tests of giving one group a new drug and some other group placebos. And God, they hate it. They hate they ever did it because without exception, you know what happened. The placebo group either, at worst, does as good as the real drug, or at worst, better. And what are we going to do with this? There's nothing to do with it. See, if Dan says it's a closed system, or wait a minute, faith healing can't work. No. Did you see that guy he took their money and all that, and they put a hand, they kind of fell on the floor, and this lump disappeared. Nah, wait, that couldn't work. It's placebo effect. No. Nothing makes sense until you understand it's a closed system. Then everything makes sense. That's what I said. Man, there's no longer a question. Because people say, well, that's a placebo effect. Well, you're right. Well, yeah, but wait a minute. No, this other group took the real drug, okay? But hey, and that worked, okay? But wait a minute, half of this people, it worked. Yeah, okay. I ain't complaining. What do you want from me? What do you make of this? Is there a general theory of everything? Yes. Theory is not exactly the word, but is there a general theory for everything? Yes. But don't ask me what, not unless you're going to pay big money. That's always the safety thing. If somebody says, wait a minute, if you actually know, I will pay big money. No, they won't, and therefore I don't ever have to tell. See? It always works. And those who would pay big money for it don't have it. It always works.